How surviving narcissistic abuse rewires your mind. Contrary to the most common and damaging myth, narcissistic abuse does not make you weak, naive, or unintelligent from a psychological standpoint. It does something far more complex and far more paradoxical. It forces your brain to evolve under extreme pressure. Many trauma psychologists describe this as adaptive hyperfunctioning. You may feel foggy, scattered, or mentally depleted now, but that is not evidence of diminished capacity. It is the residue of a mind that has been operating at an unsustainable level for years. Your nervous system has been running at full throttle, processing emotional data, threat assessment, and relational strategies simultaneously. What you are experiencing is not stupidity. It is cognitive exhaustion after prolonged survival mode. For a long time, your life was not lived in safety, but in a high-stakes psychological simulation. You were required to predict the unpredictable, to read microexpressions most people never notice, and to analyze tone, pauses, and word choice with the precision of a forensic investigator. Psychologists note that this kind of environment forces the brain into constant anticipatory processing. You learn to ask questions others never had to ask. Is that smile real or strategic? Is this kindness a prelude to punishment? Is this calm temporary or a setup? If you feel broken now, it is not because you lack intelligence. It is because you were the most cognitively engaged person in the room for far too long, constantly suppressing your own needs to survive someone else's instability. There is a cruel irony at the heart of narcissistic abuse that clinicians often point out. The narcissist attempts to turn you into a compliant, mindless extension of themselves, but in doing so, they unintentionally train you to become an elite profiler of human behavior. They sharpen your perception, your emotional literacy, and your pattern recognition to a level most people never reach. They create the very awareness that eventually exposes them. In other words, the system designed to control you also upgrades you. What feels like damage is often unintegrated power. One of the most profound changes psychologists observe in survivors is the development of what can only be described as a high-precision threat radar. While most people move through the world taking interactions at face value, you lost that luxury early on. You had to. Living with someone whose personality shifted without warning forced your brain to become exquisitely sensitive to patterns. This is known clinically as advanced pattern recognition under relational threat. You no longer evaluate behavior in isolation. You notice timing, context, and sequence. A compliment given just before a request raises a flag. A smile that does not reach the eyes registers as incongruent. A sudden burst of generosity after cruelty feels familiar rather than reassuring. When others say, "They're so charming," or "she's so kind," your internal alarm system activates, not because you are judgmental or cynical, but because your brain has learned the algorithm of abuse. You know that idealization often precedes devaluation. You recognize that silence often follows boundary setting. You have seen the cycle enough times to know how it unfolds. From a psychological perspective, this is not paranoia. It is data-driven intuition. You are not just seeing the person in front of you. You are seeing the trajectory. They are likely to pull you into months down the line. However, trauma specialists are very clear about one thing. Operating at this level without regulation is exhausting and unsustainable. These adaptations are high level, but they keep the nervous system locked in a defensive posture. When unintegrated, this intelligence does not feel empowering. It feels like anxiety, hypervigilance, or constant tension. The brain continues to scan for danger even when danger is no longer present. Psychologists often compare this stage to a powerful system without a governor, like a superhero who has discovered their abilities but not yet learned control. The energy is volatile. Without guidance, it can turn inward, manifesting as self-doubt, insomnia, or emotional reactivity. This is where healing becomes about refinement rather than erasure. The goal is not to lose these abilities, but to regulate them. Trauma-informed recovery focuses on teaching the nervous system when to stand down and when to engage. When that happens, anxiety transforms into intuition, and hypervigilance becomes discernment. The same skills that once kept you alive can then be used deliberately, strategically, and safely. Another remarkable evolution psychologists observe in survivors is the development of crisis competence. When you live in chronic chaos, your brain adapts by suppressing panic and prioritizing function. Narcissists thrive on volatility. They create emergencies, escalate conflicts, and destabilize environments because chaos gives them control. To survive this, you had to become the steady one. When they raged, broke things, or spiraled emotionally, you could not afford to collapse. You had to think. You had to plan. You had to manage outcomes. From a neurological perspective, this rewires executive functioning. The brain learns to dampen emotional flooding and switch rapidly into problem-solving mode. That is why, in real-world crises, you are often the calmest person in the room. While others freeze, panic, or become overwhelmed, your mind narrows its focus and starts calculating solutions. This is not emotional numbness. It is conditioned hyperfocus. You learned fire management because you lived in a burning house. Your anxiety, in this context, is not weakness. It is a high-speed readiness system designed to handle situations that would overwhelm an average nervous system. The third evolution is perhaps the most subtle and the most misunderstood: emotional shape-shifting. Psychologists describe this as advanced affective modulation. You learned how to adjust your tone, posture, words, and emotional energy to de-escalate dangerous situations. You knew when to be soft, when to be neutral, when to disappear emotionally, and when to offer just enough reassurance to prevent an explosion. This required extraordinary emotional intelligence. You were reading not just moods, but thresholds. You were managing someone else's emotional regulation because they could not do it themselves. While this skill was born out of necessity, it carries a cost. Survivors often lose touch with their own authentic emotional expression because they spent so long adapting to someone else's volatility. Recovery involves reclaiming this skill consciously rather than reflexively. Psychologists emphasize learning to choose when to adapt and when to remain rooted in self. Emotional intelligence becomes a tool, not a survival reflex. In truth, narcissistic abuse does not hollow you out. It overdevelops you in ways that were never meant to be sustained without rest, safety, and support. The fog, the fatigue, and the confusion you feel now are not signs of damage. They are signs that your system is finally trying to stand down. With proper integration, the very adaptations that once kept you alive can become the foundation of extraordinary clarity, resilience, and discernment. You are not broken. You are recalibrating. From a clinical perspective, the moment you recognize these adaptations for what they truly are marks a critical inflection point in recovery. Psychologists often describe this stage as post-traumatic integration. This is when the nervous system begins to understand that the war is over, even if the body is still holding its breath. For years, every skill you developed was oriented around one core question: how do I stay safe around this person? Now, the work becomes fundamentally different. The question shifts to, how do I live fully without needing to anticipate harm? This shift can feel disorienting, even frightening, because hypervigilance once gave you a sense of control. Letting it soften does not mean becoming naive. It means retraining your brain to distinguish between present safety and past threat. Psychologists note that one of the hardest adjustments for survivors is learning to turn off adaptive behaviors that were once life-saving. Emotional, shape-shifting, hyperindependence, and constant discernment were never meant to be permanent operating systems. When these traits persist unchecked, they can isolate you from genuine connection. You may find yourself exhausted by people who do not require this level of management or mistrustful of calm because chaos feels more familiar. This is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system conditioned to associate love with danger and peace with unpredictability. Healing involves gently teaching the body that stability does not equal abandonment and that ease does not precede punishment. For the narcissist, your awakening creates a very different psychological response. When you stop needing their approval, explanations, or validation, their primary source of regulation collapses. Narcissistic structures rely on external mirrors to maintain a coherent sense of self. When you withdraw your emotional labor, your reactions, and your compliance, they are left confronting an internal emptiness they cannot tolerate. This is why they may escalate, smear, or attempt hoovering behaviors. From a psychological standpoint, this is not strength on their part. It is panic. Your boundaries expose the fragility beneath their grandiosity. For you, the most protective strategy moving forward is conscious choice. Trauma therapists emphasize the importance of reclaiming agency over these abilities. You still have discernment, but you no longer need to scan every room. You still have independence, but you can now practice interdependence with safe people. You still have emotional intelligence, but you can choose authenticity over adaptation. This is how survival intelligence becomes life intelligence. Grounding practices, somatic work, and consistent boundary reinforcement help retrain the nervous system so that your gifts serve your future rather than your past. It is also essential to grieve. Psychologically, grief is not only about what happened, but about what never should have happened. You grieve the version of yourself that did not get to be carefree. You grieve the years spent managing someone else's dysfunction instead of building your own dreams. This grief is not a setback. It is evidence that your system finally feels safe enough to feel. Narcissistic abuse suppresses grief because grief requires safety. Its emergence is a sign of healing, not collapse. Ultimately, the most profound transformation occurs when you stop defining yourself in relation to the narcissist altogether. They were the environment, not the architect of who you are. Yes, your intelligence was forged under pressure, but it now belongs to you. Psychologists often say that trauma does not define identity. Integration does. When you integrate these experiences, your insight becomes wisdom, your vigilance becomes clarity, and your resilience becomes self-trust. So as you move forward, remember this. You are not here to merely survive anymore. You are here to choose, to create, and to build a life that does not require armor at every turn. The battlefield is behind you. The skills remain, but the threat does not. And that is where true healing begins.